All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joint Committee on Building and Construction, State Building and Construction. We have a couple of carryover. First off, before we get started, I do want to thank our lunch providers, the Association of General Contractors. Scott Schneider, is he in the room? Nope, he just wants to provide lunch and stay behind the scenes. So that's fantastic. If you see Scott, make sure you thank him for a fantastic lunch from the Pennant, by the way, if you're curious as to where this came from. All right, we passed over a couple of items yesterday or up at our last meeting. One of which being, the first of which was the Kansas State Fair. And really, I if the committee has questions, that's fantastic. My questions were satisfied after the fact, and I'll explain what those were. First of all, I had remembered a $5 million budget approval for the Bison building that took place 1,000 years ago. Well, no, more like 4 or 5 years ago. And the reality on that was that it did pass out of the House Appropriations Committee. It did not make it to the state budget. So that $5 million that I was under the assumption had been carried forward year after year as part of their budget never happened. That was one of our Dallas seasons. It was all a dream. All right. The rest of that, the $10 million that's currently being appropriated, is not being appropriated. It's currently being spent. It was part of the $14 million that was appropriated last year. So everything is in order as far as I'm concerned. But if there are more issues with the Kansas State Fair, I would be certainly happy to entertain them. And we do have the fiscal analyst handling the state fair here with us. Oh, and Senator McGinn is here. She's just virtual. We'll call her Charlie, in keeping with old TV shows. Okay, I would entertain a motion then to pass out the recommendation for the Kansas State Fair. All right, and seconded by Representative Owsley. Very good. That motion was by Senator Francisco, by the way. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Very good. Off we go to the Department of Wildlife and Parks. That was also carried over. And for the life of me, I can't remember the question that was stuck on that. Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that there were two questions. One had to do with, is it Lovewell purchase?
Yes.
And I believe that that land is currently owned, it's in Jewell County. It's part of Senate Bill 105, and I was corrected this morning. It's not Ducks Unlimited, it's Pheasants Forever.
Okay.
So their property that would be transferred, and the entire legislature would have to pass Senate Bill 105. The other questions we had were about dam construction, and we did hear a report from the Department of Wildlife and Park about their capital improvement budget in the Senate Ag and Natural Resources Committee this morning. The Wildlife and Parks owns a number of dams related to fishing lakes and other property that they own. So the governor has identified this state general fund money, but the department did say some of the federal money needs to have a state match in order to draw that down, and that they would be looking for any possible funding opportunities. They'd like this money to go as far as it could. So that's just comments, and I see the fiscal analyst nodding his head.
So we're confident that you didn't make any of this up. Very good. Okay. I'm glad you remembered the questions, because for the life of me, I could not get those back into my head. The land purchase is really the only one that I think we should probably reflect then in our recommendation, and that is contingent upon passage of SB 105. Otherwise, I don't think I don't see a sticking point regarding the dams. It seems like one way or another, you have to appropriate the funds, and you have to have it appropriated before the federal money can come in. And so it's kind of a whole chicken and egg that you're chasing around in this spreadsheet. Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we also noted in our committee that the state general funds would be less than 3% of the agency's budget overall. So significant money, but not a significant part of their budget.
Right, then I would entertain a motion to pass out the Wildlife and Parks recommendation. And I would, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I would move with the addition that the purchase of the property, Lovewell, is dependent on Senate Bill 105.
Very good. There's Senator Francisco made the motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Anderson. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Very good. That will be the recommendation of the committee. Okay, let's get on to today's meeting. What do you say? First up today, we have the Kansas Historical Society. And sorry, I don't have the analyst's name on this one. So
that's all right.
if you could introduce
I'm Amanda
yourself.
Prosser from KLRD, and I believe you are looking at the gold sheet in today's packet, which is the very first one. Kansas Historical Society maintains 57 buildings and structures located in 16 historic sites across the state. The Historical Society also maintains the Kansas Museum of History here in town. To maintain these buildings and structures, the agency requests capital improvement expenditures totaling just over $522,000 for fiscal year 23 and $440,000 in 2024. Each year, $375,000 is from the state general fund, while the remainder of funding comes from federal historic preservation grants and private donations. The projects requested are listed in the table. As you can imagine, the work to keep these buildings operating safely can vary greatly, from those with very modern engineered systems, such as the Kansas Museum of History, to very historic structures, which are over 100 years old. Goodness, that would be something. Over 100 years old and require their own unique knowledge and expertise in their maintenance. Third in that list, you'll see Cottonwood Ranch, which is located near Studley in Sheridan County. The Historical Society is requesting $85,000 from non-state general funds to complete necessary repairs. The next project is the Constitutional Hall in Lecompton. Here I am told that much of the exterior wood siding is the original walnut, as well as local cottonwood. And to preserve this, funding would be used to first scrape and clean some of that exterior wood, as well as in the interior, they hope to use funds to plaster and repaint interior wood doors, windows, and trim. The agency requests just over $39,000 in fiscal year 23, including 15 from private gifts and 24 from the Federal National Historic Preservation Fund for this project. Last on that list is the John Brown Museum located in Osawatomie, which houses the Adair cabin that was a station on the Underground Railroad and was used by John Brown as his headquarters. I am told that the roof on this 1928 stone requires replacement following some severe weather conditions that resulted in leaks. The replacement cost is estimated at just over $88,000 and would come from that federal fund again in fiscal year 23. Ultimately, the governor concurs with the agency's request for capital improvement expenditures for both years. And with that, I can stand for questions.
All right. Committee, do we have questions? Yes, Representative Owsley.
Thank you. And can you remind me of where the Shawnee Indian Mission is at on the capital improvements plan for the Historic Society?
Sure, you are not going to see it on the sheet. That is from some separate funding. It is not related to the funding the agency receives here. It's from federal funding. Am I saying that correct? Matthew Chappell. If you don't mind hearing from him, he can definitely answer that more clearly, if that's all right with you.
Please.
Okay.
And it's perfect with me as well.
Sorry, Representative Sutton.
Matthew Chappell, the current acting director of the Historical Society. Currently, we do have that on our capital improvement 5-year plan. Over the next 3 years. I think it's 24, 25, and 26 for each of the buildings, doing each one of them. I know that it was on the plan $112,000. We know now the cost has gone up quite a bit, so it's now 120 is what we are projecting, and we're probably going to have to project that out again for the out years as an increase in wood. So we are right now looking at doing some patchwork on some of those just to get us by until we can get that funding.
If I may, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Some of it will come from rehab and repair on the patching out of the 375 that we have for the emergency repair and services.
And you're talking strictly the rooftops on the 3 buildings?
Yes, the rooftops on those 3 buildings, the wood shingles. We have been talking also about the HVAC systems. I know that we have replaced one of those HVAC systems already. That was, it seems like it was about $90,000 on one of them. So,
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And can you remind me, are the 2 buildings open to the public, or is it just the one? And then maybe tell us why they're not open to the public.
I believe that the one on the east one is open to the public. I believe the west is somewhat, the north is opened as well. And I think the local foundation does some activities in the north one. The west one is not currently open.
So there are 2 out of the 3 that are currently open to the public.
That is my understanding, yeah.
Okay, and then just committee for a little bit of background. I ask these questions because it's close to home, and I happen to be present for a day of remembrance. I want to say in September, might have been late August, and I was able to, after quite a bit of back and forth, get a tour of the attic of the one building that we could get to the attic on, and a tour of the other 2 buildings as well. And I think there's a lot more repair there than just the rooftops. And when I got up to the attic, the amount of daylight that I could see through the shingles was alarming. The conversations that I've had with other folks is, if you went up in your attic on your home and saw that much daylight, you'd probably, want to get to this quicker than 24, 25, and 26. So I ask that, as we know, there's a lot of talk about the Shawnee Indian Mission right now, currently in this building. And I just want to bring it to this committee's attention that I think that perhaps that should be a more urgent request, in my opinion. And I guess I can leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And that actually does beg the question, why is that? I mean, if those are repairs that we're definitely looking at for at least 24, why is that not listed with the Cottonwood Ranch and Constitutional Hall and so forth?
I think that our architect, and using our architect has kind of determined that time frame of when to get that done. I know that we have done some repair work on the roofs right now and some patchwork instead of the full roof at once, and that's kind of what we've been working with and trying to get to it. It's a lot of money. And so we've kind of got to use that across the realm of all 58 buildings as well, and trying to get that done.
Sure.
Did that?
What does although just from a construction standpoint, what does patchwork look like on a cedar shake roof?
It looks like new cedar shingles.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, because they would be new cedar shingles, kind of slipped in back up in there and this seal.
You weren't rolling a tarp out on that thing.
So You know, my personal metal roofs everywhere. They outstand the hail or, you know, take care of it and stuff. But no, not at all.
Very good. Okay. All right. One other question that actually comes to mind is when we're looking at the Constitution Hall in Lecompton, uh, which was a capital set up not by Kansans. I'm wondering why we don't have Missouri footing the bill for the reconstruction on that.
I'm not going to make a comment on that.
That's fair enough. All right, committee, any further questions? Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased that Constitution Hall is quite close to the first Democratic meeting house, also in Lecompton. But the question I had is, I know that the community of Lecompton has been asked to contribute to the repair work at Constitution Hall and get that federal match. Is that same thing being looked at for the Shawnee Indian Mission?
That's a very good question. I don't think so at this time. I don't think we've done that.
Mr. Chair, I see that there's significant federal funds available for some of those matches and the repair. So I agree that there's a significant amount of repair work that needs to be done. And I would hope that we would find a way to generate some of those federal matches for this project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess the patchwork would just, I'm thinking out loud here. The Indian Mission has been put on the National Historic Landmark list, right? And I know just, I'm a painter by trade. And I never like to get involved with any residence that was on the historic register. And so being on the National Historic Landmark, what sort of complications does that entail as far as piecemealing a roof together instead of just going in and actually putting a rooftop on it? Are we spending more patching it together and trying to keep it from leaking than we would be if we just took care of the building?
I don't think so. I don't think the cost for a year or two is relatively small compared to the whole enchilada at once being done. So I don't know if I'm understanding you. Cost wise, no, I don't think we need to be patching it every year for the next 20 years. I think we do need to replace the roof in its entirety and not just doing a patch. But I know if there's leaks that we find or anything like that, we would make a patch at that point in time until we get the approval to do the whole roof.
And there's no methodology that's required to work on a building of that nature. You know, you can just have A&A roofing out. And if there's an A&A roofing out there listening, please, by no means am I Acme.
Yeah, we do have contractors that have the historic preservation kind of background in how to do it, and that's who we're utilizing. We have contracts with them to do that.
I just want to make sure we're preserving the history. Thank you.
Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here again. You mentioned the metal roof. When you register these, is that one of the guidelines? You can't change the roof?
For historic preservation purposes, my understanding is that you want to keep that look and everything from the historic standpoint. If they were, say, if it was a metal roof 100 years ago and it became a part of it, then it would stay that same kind of, for preservation purposes, the metal roof. So wood shingles, it'd be the same. When it was an original and put on the registry and everything, it was wood shingle roofing. And so you would want to keep that the same for the historic preservation of it and presentation of that building.
It doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, year after year after year, we got roof after roof after roof. He was in our committee earlier today, and I told him it's a black hole. I mean, these things just go and go and go. And if we could put a roof on there that was a metal roof that would take care of this for years and years, couldn't you just have a little notation in your brochure when they went to look at that? In that period, it was probably a cedar shingle roof, but there could have even been, I'm guessing, in the early 1900s, there was the corrugated metal, you know. So to me, it's like these budgets get higher and higher and higher and higher, and we all want to see the old buildings there. We're all good with that. But, does it really matter on a roof? I mean, some of these are probably old enough they could have had sod roofs. I don't know. But I just think that's something you guys ought to look at. You mentioned that earlier, and it seems to me like that was a very good point that, if we could put a metal roof on and Representative Osley wouldn't show up there and see daylight, he'd be much happier than showing up to see a roof that doesn't last. So
We'll look into it.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Senator McGinn.
thank you. I would like to add to that because, if you look at, the traditional asphalt roofs, now if you buy the more expensive one, your insurance goes down. And so I think that somehow we need to look into if you can buy a better product that gives you more life longevity. And I don't know if we are self-insured by the state. I assume we are. But I don't know where you start. Do you start with the state historical preservation folks, or do you got to go to the federal or the locals? But again, there's far superior products out there that I think we should be looking at.
Very nice. All right, now we have a member of the audience jumping up and down, waving his hands. He really wants to talk. If you could introduce yourself to the committee, that would be fantastic.
Patrick Zollner, our SHPO.
Thank you, Chair. Patrick Zollner, the Director of the Cultural Resource Administration, the previous acting director. Just want to clarify some things. Anyone with just on the National Register of Historic Places, we do have alternatives for roofing. If you have there are almost no wood shingled roofs anymore. As Representative Owsley has pointed out, Shawnee Indian Mission is a National Historic Landmark, one of 26 in the state. And we, as the state caretaker, has always preserved these to the highest standards. And to our knowledge, Shawnee Indian Mission never had any other type of roofing. The state inquired it by eminent domain in 1927. It had a wood shingled roof. We have gotten just now 22 years on that wood shingled roof, so that's not too terribly bad. And further, one more point on wood shingle roofs, when you see daylight in the attic, doesn't necessarily mean it's leaking. They shrivel and dry up. The rain hits them, they swell up. We do monitor it. We probably do have a few leaks that we'll take care of. But so for a handful of buildings, the 16 state historic sites, we do try to preserve them with the highest standard with wood shingle roofs. If you, like Senator Francisco can attest, have just a building on the National Register, asphalt shingles are an acceptable substitute. So just wanted to clarify that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I'll just comment really briefly that this is a site that's part of a set of buildings and almost a park. So there are exhibits that help explain the story, but actually the visit to the exterior is among the most important part of that historic experience. So, and I appreciate the comments because all the years that 1008 Ohio, that was built during Quantrill's raid, had a wood roof. You could see light when it was dry and you had a drought, but as soon as raindrops start falling, the wood swells and expands. Those shingles expand. Thank you.
Right, there's a whole lot more. Yes, Representative Alcala.
Well, I would say, and mine's just a comment, thank you, Mr. Chairman, is that
I like the historic preservation nature of things. As original as we can keep them. I know there's a cost that's associated with that, but I don't know what the balance is with the amount of tourism that those facilities bring in for people to look at. But I think the more we can keep it as original, I think we should. Uh, just want to let people know that I would support this budget. All right, well, that was a whole lot more discussion on the Historical Society than I was expecting. Very nice. That's good, good, good. All right. One thing I would add, however, I like seeing the John Brown Museum being included on that. We haven't spent too much effort repairing or keeping that up to date for a long time. I remember touring that one as a child. Grew up not too far away from it. It's a cool building. I really think they should kind of prop that up more as a tourist issue or attraction. It's part of Kansas history. It's a big part. Anyway, I would entertain a motion regarding the Kansas Historical Society. Yes, or Senator Francisco.
So move.
Second by Representative Alcala. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Very good. That will be the committee recommendations. All right. Moving on. Let's see if we can have as much. Let's see if we can have as much conversation surrounding the Department of Transportation. Take it away, Merle.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Merle Riedel. I am with Legislative Research. I'm going to be talking about the Department of Transportation. It is on the blue document. Just a reminder that the Department of Transportation maintains about 980 buildings. Those include offices, shops, labs, support structures, chemical equipment and material storage facilities, as well as various other buildings. Looking down on the bottom of page 27, you'll see the FY 2023 capital improvements. The agency submits a revised estimate of $33.2 million, all from the State Highway Fund for capital improvements for buildings in FY 2023. This is an increase of $10.2 million above the FY 23 approved amount. That increase is largely attributed to the agency's supplemental request, which really includes cost increases that they've experienced within the last year. And these cost increases apply primarily to three projects: an increase of $5.5 million for the District 1 headquarters construction, $2.7 million for sub-area modernization projects, and $600,000 for rehabilitation and repair costs. Moving on, you'll see the agency requests $5 million for rehabilitation and repair in FY 23. Moving to the next page, on page 28, roofing and re-roofing, the agency requests $538,385 for re-roofing projects at various locations. That includes Anthony, Ashland, Belleville, Manhattan, Norton, Pratt, Troy, and Waverly. Next is sub-area modernization. Agency requests $8.7 million for sub-area modernizations in 4 locations. Those locations include Beloit, Blaine, Iola, and Sharon Springs. The agency also has land purchases listed. Agency requests $456,756 for the purchase of land. This land is primarily used to support KDOT operations along the highway, provide extra area for mixing of materials, and to store maintenance equipment. And those land purchases will happen in Garnett, Independence, Salina, and Topeka. Chemical storage facility, the agency requests $256,876 for construction of a 1,000-ton chemical storage facility in Pratt. Moving on to the construction of the District 1 headquarters. This was a project approved last year by the 2022 legislature. The agency requests $16.7 million for the initial phase in a 2-year project to construct a new District 1 headquarters in Topeka. Total project cost is estimated at $24.2 million. The current complex, which is located at 121 Southwest 21st Street in Topeka, was constructed in 1934. The facility is not really suitable to house modern equipment. The construction project will relocate and consolidate several aspects on existing KDOT property in Southwest 21st Street and Rice Road near the I-70 interchange in East Topeka. Moving on to page 29, area shop bay extension and electrical updates. The agency requests $1.7 million to extend bays and update electrical systems at area shops. Finally, the governor concurs with the agency's estimate for capital improvements for FY 2023. And Mr. Chairman, I can stand for questions or move on to FY 24.
Any questions from Merle so far? Seeing none, let's keep on rolling.
Very good. For the FY 24 capital improvements, the agency requests, and I'm looking on page 29, the agency requests $24.5 million, all from the State Highway Fund in capital improvements for buildings in FY 24. This is a decrease of $8.7 million. Decrease is primarily attributed to expenditures for the initial phase in the construction of the District 1 headquarters that are not scheduled to reoccur in FY 24. You can see again here, rehabilitation and repair. The agency again requests $5 million for rehabilitation and repair in 24. Re-roofing, agency requests $719,916 for re-roofing projects. Those projects include Abilene, Coldwater, Fort Scott, the Gage Metro Cone, Goodland, Medicine Lodge, Montgomery County, Seneca, and Tribune. Moving on to sub-area modernization, agency requests $9.2 million for sub-area modernizations in 4 projects: Altoona, Atchison, Osage City, and Yates Center. Land purchases, agency requests $45,000 for the purchase of land in FY 24. Land purchases will occur in Erie and Lyons. Moving on to the next page, page 30, chemical storage facility. The agency requests $268,993 for construction of a 1,000-ton chemical storage facility in Kinsley. Last in 23 it is Pratt, in 24 it is Kinsley. Moving on to construction of the District 1 headquarters, agency requests $7.5 million for the final phase in that two-year project to construct a District 1 headquarters. And then the last item is the area shop bay extension and electrical update. Agency requests $1.7 million to continue that effort in FY 24. And Mr. Chairman, I can stand for questions. Apologies. One last item for FY 24. The governor concurs with the agency's recommendation.
All right, Representative Delberdang.
Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out what is it we're approving here. Construction District 1 headquarters in Topeka. Is that building going up when you first turn off the turnpike?
The current District 1 headquarters is located on 21st Street and Kansas Avenue. So if you were driving down Kansas Avenue when you crossed 21st Street, you'll see a stone building up on a hilltop built in 1934. That's where KDOT's currently located. Where they would be moving is to a site out by the I-70 interchange in East Topeka. The challenges with the current facility is it's a 1934 structure, can't house modern equipment. There's also challenges that when they bring heavy equipment in and out of that site for maintenance, they have to bring it right through the urban core of Topeka. So it's difficult to move that equipment.
I assume that building, that's already being built, so it's already approved. We're just rubber stamping at this point, or what?
No, the site that they're asking to move to is the construction of a new building.
So it's not the new building. They're building right by the I-70.
Hey, Leo, I think you're confused with the KTA building. I think
it could be. I'm just trying to figure out what we're approving here because everybody keeps rubber stamping. So, I've got another question. Just what is a chemical storage facility for 1,000 tons of chemicals? Is it hydrochloric acid or is it, what are we storing out here?
So I couldn't tell you the exact components or chemicals that would be stored in that chemical storage facility. We do have representatives from the agency here who might be able to talk more about what's typically held in those. We do have Acting Deputy Secretary Greg Schneider and his staff available, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciate it if you would.
Yes, then by all means, is that Mr. Schneider? Excellent. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I am Greg Schieber, the interim Deputy Secretary and State Transportation Engineer. So specific representative to the chemical storage, that would be salt for our snow and ice removal on the maintenance side.
So for chemical storage, we're talking about salt.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right, and Representative Alcala, was yours for the
So that would be the fluid chemical that they spray
prior to a storm coming into town? They would just, so you said salt, but there's also a liquid chemical they spray.
Yes, so Representative, that would be, so the hard salt would be stored there, and then we would slake it in our maintenance facility that would put it into liquid form that we would shoot out on the highways.
Is that flammable?
I would have to.
The reason I asked that is the chemical. The reason I asked that is because the facility you were thinking is not the right one. There's a roundabout out on I-70 that's light industrial, and there's already some facilities out there. I got no problem with that, but the storage within neighborhoods I have a problem with, mainly because of any type of combustible or flammable. I think that it should be ran through the local municipality and their fire department to make sure that it's safe to put that there. And then we're talking large quantities. How much are you talking?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is our maintenance bureau chief. He will be able to answer more details like that.
Robert Fuller, Bureau Chief of Maintenance, Department of Transportation.
Welcome to committee.
Thank you. It's salt and the salt brine, and it's non-flammable. We use the term chemical mostly because of environmental reasons.
Okay.
If you have runoff or something, it's considered.
I misunderstood. I thought when I asked him about the liquid that's sprayed.
That's mostly water, and it is
Mostly water?
non-flammable.
Okay, great. Well, that answers my question. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thanks for being here and settling that question. Senator Francisco.
Probably a follow-up on that. I know that there's been stories in the news about the problems of putting salt on the roads and having that inner streams or aquifers. Are we looking at alternatives to salt, or is?
There aren't very many good ones, but what we do with the brine, the liquid that Representative Collett mentioned, is we can use a lot less salt by applying it to the road in a liquid form prior to the storm. And then that gets into the pavement and you can use less salt later on. So, I mean, we not only from a cost standpoint, but from an environmental standpoint, we do look at any way we can. We've started using beet juice, believe it or not, that helps the salt adhere to the road. And there again, you can use less. So it's on our radar, Senator.
Pleased to hear that. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Did you say beet juice?
I said beet juice.
Well, look at that. I use beet juice too, but it's just for as a pick me up. So afternoon. So great to hear that we can use it on the roads too. I had no idea. Now it seems to me like that would be expensive though.
It's actually a sort of a byproduct that we can get pretty cheaply.
Really? Yeah. Very neat. Right. Thanks for that. All right, committee. Further questions regarding beets particularly? That's neat. Yes, Senator Francisco.
I would just make the motion that we approve the capital improvement requests for 23 and 24.
Second.
Seconded by everyone, it sounds like. We're going to give that one to Senator Reddy. I think she was the loudest. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Very good. Let's move on then to the judicial branch. Welcome to committee.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My name is Martin DeBoer. I'm fiscal analyst with the judicial branch. Just note that the judicial branch is a pass-through budget that's submitted through statute in the governor's recommendation. So for FY23, the agency submits a revised estimate of $210,000 for their capital improvement projects. These are all done across the street. They have library stacks of $100,000 to consolidate the library material and compact shelving. Now, I'd like to note that they have worked with Department of Administration and Washburn University to reuse some of their old shelving tracks. So those will be reused in this project. That saves approximately $200,000 in the total cost that they were expecting. So that brings it down to $1 million. Or 100,000, sorry, 100,000. They have an IT help desk in FY23, so that's 110,000 of expenditures, and this is for a dedicated space for IT staff to prepare remote access equipment. The agency indicates that this will allow for implementation of public health, safety, and security guidelines so the staff can be successful in performing their tasks. And again, that note there, where you would normally see the governor's recommendation, this is a pass-through budget in the governor's recommendation. So I can stand for 23 or move to 24.
Right, questions regarding 23, committee? Seeing none, let's keep on rolling.
Fantastic. At the bottom of the page there, you'll have FY24 capital improvements of 350,000. These are all from the SGF. And this supports the Judicial Branch Learning Center. So they request 50,000 for expenditures to create a Judicial Branch Learning Center. This is intended to utilize an interactive learning environment for all visitors and information. When people come, they want to know what the Judicial Branch does. This is a fun, interactive way for them to get used to it. And then they are continuing their office restructure. Last year, they had phase one on the second floor, moving some of the appeals court judges and staff all to the same floor. So this continues the remodel. So there's 300,000 expenditures to develop space for centralized court services. Agency indicates modernization, court system needs due to COVID and other issues. So for instance, examples are centralized language access services, online dispute resolution for the court systems to allow parties access to the court system in an efficient and timely manner. Again, they've worked with the Department of Administration to discuss the plans and how to best proceed, as well as Homeland Security on how to protect sensitive items. And again, there, the last paragraph, pursuant to KSA 753721F, this is a pass-through. And we do have a member of the agency here, Sean Jurgensen, Chief Counsel.
I saw him hiding back there, yep.
If you have any further questions.
All right, actually, I do have a question. Is this kind of like the issue that arose with the state fair? It seems to me that I remember this funding already being appropriated last year. Am I mistaken on that, or at least for some of these projects?
So, Chairman, Committee, so some of the funding was appropriated, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't know. I can look into that for you.
Okay. The one thing that did sound new was the learning center, the Judicial Branch Learning Center. I hadn't heard anything about that before, but all of the other stuff seemed very, very familiar to me. I think we already approved the funding for that.
So last
John
year,
Jurgensen's telling me I'm a liar. So one second, let's get him up here. Welcome to committee, Sean.
Good afternoon. I'm Sean Jurgensen with the Judicial Branch. This committee approved it. The appropriation hasn't went through yet, though. The project is completed. They were able to complete the project ahead of schedule. So it's approved and it's completed as far as the IT help desk. But no, the appropriation hasn't went through. And we have to give a shout out to Frank and D of A. We actually saved $1 million on the compact shelving. It wasn't a $100,000 save. We included the $100,000 in there initially to help pay for some of the shelving that we needed to create more space in the basement of the Judicial Center. But they worked with Washburn University, Frank and Stephanie did, and Washburn had a bunch of unused compact shelving that they were just going to toss. And so not only did they give us enough of that, but they gave us more than we needed so we can continue to do this for free. They gave us all that for free. And so a project that was going to cost the state about $1.2 million is now going to cost about $100,000, maybe a little bit more than $100,000. So we really appreciate his help there. And another thing Frank is doing with one of the contractors we have on state contract is you have to put tracks in the floor for these compact shelves to work. And they're using the connection he has with this general contractor to use tracks that have already been purchased. And so that's helping drive the cost down even further. And then the Judicial Branch Learning Center is actually not just a place to come learn about the judicial branch, albeit that will be a really cool part of it. It's actually going to be a place where an interactive place where students can come and learn about all three branches of government. And we've been trying to work with leadership here in the legislature and then contacts within the education community on how to do that pedagogically. So did I answer your question? I think I did.
Well, you answered several of them, but then created one, and that was that the money hasn't been appropriated yet. The project has been completed.
So
Art horse.
Well, it's because my understanding is it came from our docket fee fund, and we had that funding that was going to pay for that originally, right?
So I'm Stephanie Smith. I'm judicial administrator.
Welcome,
So Thank you. So last year you did appropriate funding for the IT help desk and a mail room. So those were for FY23. For FY24, you have not, the funding has not yet been appropriated for the office restructure. We did ask for those, for that money with ARPA funds, and we had it, I think we've testified before you before saying we were going to include it in our ARPA request. We did not get money for that. But you did have a hearing this summer where Sean testified about the office restructure, and you did approve that to pass it through to the committee once session started.
Okay,
Does
okay,
that
very good.
answer your
And then the construction started based on that summer committee?
No, that construction has not started for
Oh,
the
okay.
office restructure. It's for the IT help desk that was already approved for FY 2023,
Very good.
and that's completed.
Okay, you kind of set me at ease there. I was gonna get all fired up. All right. Committee questions? No, I think they have the same questions I did, or they think I'm just going off on a wild tangent. I'm not sure which. All right. All right, no questions from the committee. Very good. All right, then I would entertain a motion if there was no more to hear from the budget analyst. Was there anything else for 24 that we were looking at? There he is. I couldn't find him because he's, kind of diminutive. Yeah. All right. Well, then, committee, I would entertain a motion to pass out the committee as per the agency request, since it's not the governor request. All right. Moved by Representative Housley, second by Senator Francisco. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say nay. Very good. Well, then, let's move on to the Department of Commerce. See, I told you he was a small person.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sharday Kane, and I am the fiscal analyst for the Department of Commerce, and I am on the green sheet in your packet. The Kansas Department of Commerce has capital improvement expenditures for the 25 workforce centers that are in Kansas. The fiscal year 2023 capital improvements include $108,100 for a plumbing project. The plumbing project is to update restroom fixtures, install automatic flush valves, and inspect and repair as needed the waste lines. For fiscal year 2024, the Topeka Workforce Center capital improvement would be to modernize one elevator. They did look into finding out how much it would cost to replace the parts that need to be replaced, but it was costly, so they wanted to request the full replacement rather than repair.
All right, those are pretty straightforward. Committee, any questions regarding those? Let's not get too deep into the 2030. I don't really want to hear more about that. Seeing none. All right, thank you very much. I would entertain a motion to pass out the Department of Commerce budget recommendations. All right. The motion was by Representative Alcala. The second was by sorry, Senator Francisco. I almost did it again. I don't know what's going on. All right, let's move on forward then to the Kansas Department of Corrections.
Did we vote?
Oh, I'm sorry. We had a motion, we had a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Very good. That will be the committee report. Thank you for that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Now let's move on to the Department of Corrections.
And the Department of Corrections is on the pink sheet. The first page, you will see different funding sources for the Department of Corrections. The Correctional Institutions Building Fund, which is a 10% of the transfers of the first $50 million of the State Gaming Revenue Fund, the State Institutions Building Fund, and the Correctional Industries Fund, which comes from sales, the manufactured products that the inmates make. On the next page, you will see the table with some of the different projects on them, and then each of the facilities And I will just note that you'll notice for the facilities in the current year, the expenditures are under the facilities, whereas in the budget year, that money will be at the main office and then distributed after the budget is passed. So for 2023, the agency's request a revised estimate of 16.8 million, including 4.6 million state general fund for capital improvements. This is an all funds increase of 7.8 million or 87.9%, and a state general fund increase of 4.1 million above the 2023 amount. The increase is mainly attributable to additional expenditures from the CIBF and the added debt service principal for the Athena project. One thing I will note is we had a tour of a couple of the facilities this last interim, and the correctional people were talking about the CIBF has been the same amount. It's actually a little under $5 million that they have to use for rehab and repair for all of their facilities. And one of their requests is to look into increasing that. I have, at Senator Francisco's request, worked up some scenarios. If this committee is interested in looking at that, I can describe that and we can talk about different scenarios of increasing the correctional building fund.
Okay, that sounds like kind of a can of worms, but just real high level. When they asked about increasing CIBF, what sort of dollar amounts are we talking about here? Ballpark.
Well, one of the things I want to do is increase it per inflationary rates. One of the issues is that in statute, it is 10% of the first 50 million of the transfer. So there's an entire formula in statute of how this money is to be dispersed that would have to be massaged.
Okay, but so roughly they're getting 5 million then from CIBF?
About 4.9.
Or 9, okay. And they would prefer it was higher?
About double.
Okay.
They're looking to go from
inflation.
million.
Okay, very good. All right, yeah, that sounds like a conversation I'd like to have. Not sure.
I don't have the documents all put together and nice and neat and clean to explain it for today, but if you would like to have a meeting in the very near future that I could pass out some documents and explain the breakout and the percentages and how that all works.
I think that myself, I would find that very interesting. I'm seeing several nods, and so some saying, please don't do that. Yeah. I think maybe moving it to another meeting would be a very good idea. All right.
Moving on, for 2023, the governor does recommend 17.3 million, including 5.2 million state general fund. This is an increase of 560,000 state general fund. The increase is for fencing and lighting at the minimum security facility at Lansing. For 2024, the agency requests 154.3 million, including 141.5 million state general fund. The request includes 5 enhancements. The first is to demolish the Lansing Correctional Maximum Security Building. You will remember that a new facility was built about 2 years ago, and so this is the old 150-year-old stone building for 9.9 million. Build a medical and support building at Topeka Correctional Facility for 36.9 million. A new minimum security facility at Hutchinson for 66.8 million. A new vocational building at the Juvenile Correctional Complex for 19.2 million, and a new laundry facility at Topeka for 5.5 million. The governor does recommend 20.5 million, including 13 million state general fund. It's a decrease of 133.7 million, which is the majority of the enhancements they requested. The one enhancement the governor does recommend is the 9.9 million to demolish the old Lansing facility. And with that, I will stand for questions.
All right. Well, We knew that that one was coming anyway. Those other ones had kind of surprised me. I'm a little comforted by the fact that she didn't approve those.
Lansing facility is actually just a few years younger than the Lansing facility.
So it wasn't built during the Lincoln administration.
Close, not quite.
Very good. Has there been any discussion? Oh, that's still the old Lansing facility is still on the prison grounds. Though. Is that correct? Yep, that's what I thought. All right, very good. Committee. Yes, Representative Alcala.
Yeah, I just want to make sure maybe I missed the bus here. Why are you doing the presentation and not someone from the department?
Because I'm the fiscal analyst and the fiscal analysts do these presentations. The department only does the 5-year capital improvement plans during the interim.
I should know that. The only reason I asked
You
that.
had me thrown a little bit there.
Well, I got a little confused myself, and so that's why I was asking that question. Thank you.
I thought maybe you thought I should have been higher ed as opposed to corrections. That was what
I just, what kicked in my mind, I didn't want staff to start carrying water for departments doing presentations when they should be here. Thank you.
I heard a voice off in the distance. Is that Senator McGinn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. For Shirley, you're talking about the historic Lansing prison building, I believe, and the building that we built was to tear down and correct a building that was not architecturally designed very well. And I'm wondering, I'm trying to understand, I thought we were using some of those beds as well. And are we going to replace these beds somewhere, or have we already replaced them out there across the state?
Okay, you're correct in that the building that was demolished for the new construction was the one that had been built in 1985 that was not up to standards. But when they built the new building, it incorporated the maximum security facility, the old stone building, as well as the 1985 building. So there are no prisoners currently in the old maximum security facility.
Okay, thank you. I must have missed the second construction on a prison. So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. And Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your interest in looking at the Correctional Institute's building fund, because I think that statutorily has been kept for a number of years. So if the committee did want to recommend an increase in that, should we do that before we pass this capital improvements budget, in case there's other things we would want to add with that additional funding?
Maybe a different way to phrase that. When does Department of Corrections report out, Shirley?
That's exactly what I was going to talk about. The department doesn't, this budget doesn't report out till the 17th. So if we were to meet maybe next Monday, then we could have that discussion before the report out.
That would be my recommendation. If
excellent, I'm good with that as well. Representative Owsley.
Thank you. And it just seems a shame to knock down that maximum security. I'm guessing all other avenues have been exhausted, because I know when Chairman Billinger, had us on the field trip out there, and that's an impressive building, and it's got a lot of historic value. And there's still some neat facades even after the renovations that have been previously done.
It's my understanding, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong here, that west wall that faces out to the road will be kept, and the majority of the building will be renovated and worked around. But that it's my understanding that west wall that is what everybody sees driving along that road will be kept.
I wonder if they'll restack the turrets to their original form as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? All right. Now, I think, based on what we've said, we can report out these recommendations and then revisit the funding mechanism next week. Is that?
So whatever you want to do, sir.
Yeah, I would like to get that out of the way. Yes, Senator Francisco.
Since we have time, if I would be interested in looking at the possibility of increasing the rehabilitation and repair funding. Right now, the governor's recommending 5 million. The agency requested 10 million. So if indeed there is a way to double that amount from the CIBF, then an easy recommendation would be to increase the amount in rehabilitation and repair. That gives the agency a lot of flexibility.
Unfortunately, without changing statute, it's capped right now at that 5%.
No, that's why I was hoping that we could have that discussion on if we think it should be changed, and then based on that, make a different recommendation on capital improvements. So would you want to pass this out and then come back and change it?
Well, if we
could pass it over.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do. I think you're right on that. If it does come down to modifying the total amount, we wouldn't want to have to open it back up and fiddle under the hood. Let's go ahead and pass over this one and deal with it at our next meeting, which sounds like maybe next Monday. Sounds like a great option. In which case, we don't have to look too much at 24 either, do we? We wouldn't really have to look at 24 right now either, for that matter.
I talked about 24, so.
Oh,
Somebody has questions.
I was off on a different tangent in my head by that time. All right, committee, further questions regarding the Department of Corrections that we are going to come back to next week? Seeing none? All right, very good. Thank you, Shirley. All right. Let's move forward with the Board of Regents.
Afternoon, committee.
Good afternoon.
I will be reading from this lilac, purple, whatever you'd like to call it, document right here. As you can see, the universities are listed on that front page, and then we're going to flip over to the back, which gives that detail. So the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year 2023 was $212.1 million, including 45 million SGF for capital improvements. The major capital improvements include Forsyth Library renovation at Fort Hays, Morris Central renovation at Emporia, and the Marcus Welcome Center at Wichita State. And I give a little bit of information about those projects. And the governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year 2023, and I will stand for questions about that.
All right, I'm trying to catch up. Committee, are there any questions regarding 23? Seeing none, let's go on to 24.
Okay. The agency's request 205.9 for fiscal year 2024, including 45 million for capital improvements. The majority of this request for an enhancement is capital renewal and capital demolition. And then the other projects I've listed are Mosier Lab at KSU Vet Med, facility renovations at Emporia State. There's 2 of those for Welch Stadium and King Hall. And so the governor recommends 190.9 million, including 30 million SGF for capital improvements. The recommendation of the 30 million was to continue capital renewal and capital demolition, which is a decrease of 15 million SGF below what the agency's requested. And I am, again, happy to stand for questions on 24.
Okay, you're very speedy. Where did the decrease of $15 million come from?
So it's a decrease from what the agencies had requested for the capital renewal and capital demolition.
Oh, demolition. Okay. So we're not going to be demolishing?
There's still, it's just a decrease of it, just not what they had requested.
Okay, very good. All right. Any questions regarding 24? Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to say that there have been some concerns brought up in my community regarding the projects identified for demolition. In particular, and I meant to ask staff about this earlier, but I'm not sure that Smith Hall was ever on the list to be one of those to be demolished, but that's the ongoing discussion. It's a facility that was rated B out of a B, C, D, B rating for condition. And my concern would be, one, is there a process that the regents go through when they're talking about demolishing a building, especially if it's eligible to be on the state register? And is there any requirement to look at that definition of obsolete? You know, what is an obsolete building? The one they've identified is right across from the student union, so obviously in a good location, and probably the bad place for a park.
I'm not sure what the question was, but I can definitely follow up with the regents to see just what their process is when they're talking about these demolition projects and if there's any criteria of such that they go through.
Excellent. And now I'm also, I didn't see Smith Hall on here. Is that just something that's in discussion and not currently being budgeted? Is that, am I understanding it correctly, Senator?
I don't know that they've identified the individual buildings, nor would they do so as part of this request. But I don't know that it was identified when we talked about that during the interim meetings. But I know that there has been a request to the Board of Regents to demolish Smith Hall. And the concern was also that there's no definition of obsolete. You know, does the university just say this is an obsolete building? So I thought if there were those concerns, this is my chance to raise it during a meeting. But I would be concerned about approving additional funding for demolition of buildings if we don't understand the criteria that's being used.
Well, there is a definition for obsolete. It just doesn't apply very well anymore. Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They do have guidelines, and I'm sure if you contact Regents, they'll let you know what they are. We've had this for a long, long time.
Francisco.
I have spoken with Blake Flanders, and my particular concern was if we rate condition of buildings, should we understand those conditions? Again, Smith Hall was rated as a B, so that tells me that the building is in still usable shape. Thank you.
Representative Delperdang.
We've got a couple of us talking over here. When you're looking on the, I'm just going to say the page 36, kind of top line there, Board of Regents, it jumps from 10 million in 23 for both agency and governor, jumps up to 90 million for 24. What's the difference? What's the delta here?
I can go back and look at my spreadsheet and give you some more information as to why.
Okay.
That is significant. Now, could that be, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, but could that be something along the lines of what we ran into in corrections, where it's under the agency for right now and then gets split out to the specific locations as we get a little closer in? Am I,
Yes.
on base here. Okay, all right. That's because what I'm seeing, yeah, that 90 million is a huge jump, but I'm looking at this, at the numbers down below, and there's not a giant trend change there. So that would be my assessment would be that that'll be that 90 million for Board of Regents, because they don't have a whole lot of buildings under Board of Regents themselves. That'll get divvied up under the various universities as we get a little closer. My bet. That's just my assessment, my guess. All right, committee, further questions? None? This is a bigger budget. All right, seeing none, I'll have a recommendation, or I am open to a recommendation for the Board of Regents. Representative Owsley.
Mr. Chair, with regards to that last question and getting back to us with a little more information, would it be appropriate to skip over this one if we're meeting again until Monday?
Seeing as how we're meeting on Monday, I think that's certainly appropriate. We can do that.
Thank you.
All right, well then let's move forward to the Department of Labor and none other than Mr. Stephen Wu.
Hi, Stephen Wu, Legislative Research. Out of consideration of time, I'm going to move pretty briskly through the Department of Labor's capital improvements request. It'll be on the tan sheet. There's a brief description of capital improvements overall up above the table. In the table, you'll see the agency's request as well as the governor's recommendation for 23 and 24. For both of these years, there is about 1.3 million budgeted for capital improvements. A little under 800,000 of this comes from SGF. The rest is from the Workers' Comp Fee Fund. As far as the projects that are included with these are all items that you've seen before in the 5-year request. They're broken down by fiscal year in pages 29 to 31. You'll see that there's some money in there for general rehab and repair. There's some money in there for parking lot seals and overlays, some money in there to install a new double entry entrance, some money in there for boiler replacements and so on. Would be happy to elaborate on any specific one of those items, but otherwise those are all items and projects that this committee has seen before.
And not only that, but I think the money has been appropriated in the previous budget for these. Am I correct?
Let's see. So these are monies for 23 and 24. The plan, the funding request was included within the 5-year plan.
Right.
The funding that you see reflected here would be specifically for those 2 years of that plan.
Gotcha. All right, questions, committee? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on, this is the first one that has no surprises whatsoever. All right, would entertain a motion on the Department of Labor for 23 and 24.
So moved.
Okay. Motion made by Senator Reddy and seconded by Senator Francisco. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. All right, that will be our recommendation. Very good, very good. Let's go on with the Department of Administration.
Sure. This will be on the salmon sheet. So the Department of Administration's capital improvements budget, just as a reminder, it's going to seem pretty large because a lot of it comes in the form of debt service. The Department of Administration pays for the debt service for a lot of the projects within the state, throughout the state of Kansas. But in terms of capital projects specifically, you'll see them detailed in text on page 41 and in numerical form on page 42. I'm just going to go through the 3 capital improvements projects that are listed in the table because those are the biggest items that are reflected, the biggest changes that are reflected in the budget here. So the first, we see some monies requested for the capital complex rehab and repair. There's about 4.2 million of this in 23 and about 5 million of this in 24. You'll see that there's a gradual increase in this request from, if you follow the trend from 22 to 24. This is largely due to the agency's supplemental request in 24 of increasing the overall rehab and repair budget to 5 million. This would be for general rehab and repair purposes throughout various buildings in the capital complex. This would fund everything from general maintenance to asbestos abatement, minor building refurbishments, and so on. The second item is one I'm sure this committee is very familiar with. Involves the Docking State Office Building.
What?
If you'd like me to go through the details of that, would be more than happy to. But otherwise, I would just remark that in the budget, you'll see $70 million allocated for this in 23 and $40 million of this allocated in 24. That $70 million in 23, that includes the $60 million SGF that the legislature appropriated last session. The rest of it is in federal ARPA funds. And in 24, that $40 million, that's just entirely in ARPA funds. So we'll see a drop off of SGF spending from 23 to 24 as ARPA spending picks up.
Music to my ears. All right.
Lastly is a new item in fiscal year 24 is for the state printing plant. This is about $6.5 million SGF. It would be, the agency indicates it would be a one-time spend for deferred maintenance and to upgrade the printing plant's the components within the printing plant so that it can better serve the various components of state government throughout the state of Kansas. You can see a bit more detail on that on the text form in page 43. About halfway down the page, there's a paragraph that starts second and describes in detail about what the agency specific needs and requests for this are. And the funding that would be allocated for this would be to address various problems, such as needing to install a temporary HVAC system to mitigate some potential damage to paper inventories and so on. If the committee has specific questions on this, Director of the Facilities and Property Management, Frank Burnham, is here with us, as well as, I believe, the Secretary of Administration, Adam Profit. I'm sure they would be more than happy to go into further detail on these.
I probably would raise the question of why we would install a temporary HVAC system.
I'm sorry, I perhaps in speaking a bit quick, stumbled over some words. They would be installing they'd be revamping the HVAC system overall. They have needed to install a temporary HVAC system as a stopgap to prevent short-term.
Temporarily.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay. That's the name. All right. Well, that makes more sense then. If it's just in between while we're actually upgrading the HVAC system.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The agency would prefer to not rely on a temporary system if possible.
I think that's sound. All right. Now, I also recall a bill being dropped into appropriations regarding the printing office expanding their capabilities or expanding their client base. Would this $6.5 million also be serving to make that more feasible, or is that
There's, as I recall, I'd have to follow up
entirely separate?
Bill number, but there's a bill in both House Appropriations as well as Senate Ways and Means that would authorize the printing plant to print for local municipalities. So anything that we print out of this plant would impact any of the recipients of those printed documents. So if those bills pass, then that would include local municipalities as well.
All right, but that's not the rationale for this 6.5.
No, it's not.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's good to hear. Committee, I would comment on the going from 2.7 to 5 million on capital complex renovation. We have been deferring maintenance on that forever and ever and ever, and so I for one am kind of happy to see this particular increase in spending because it's going to save us money, I think, down the road when we are not having to replace 50 windows at a time to the tune of it was just ridiculous numbers that come about. So I'm happy to see us moving in the right direction so that we'll be doing maintenance and not deferring maintenance. That's just my personal opinion on that one. Committee, any questions for Stephen regarding the Department of Administration? Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions and then one suggestion. But my questions are regarding the debt service on the 2016-2019 refinancing. I know that the governor has been very good about looking at all the percentages of debt. And I'm wondering if any of this debt is higher than the debt that's being proposed to pay off the reservoirs.
To clarify, what do you mean by higher?
Well, I think the reservoir debt was like 2.56 and 3.0 something. So I'm wondering if we know the percentage on the bonds.
So I have to go back and double check on that. But what I can say now is that the largest impediment to paying those bonds, the bonds listed here, off early, is that there aren't any callable dates for those bonds within 23 and 24. The soonest callable date for those wouldn't be until I think 25 at the soonest.
That's very helpful. Mr. Chair, my other comment is really a recommendation, and that's on page 41 when we're talking about the Docking State Office Building. The wording is that the State Finance Council resolution approved the renovation of docking into a 3-story building with office and meeting space. And then they go on to say the renovated building, but in fact, this is being torn down to the basement and built up. So I would like to see this report substitute newly constructed. The newly constructed building will have 3 floors, public lobby. It will not be a renovated building.
Have no issue with that. That is technically more accurate. Not even technically, that's just more accurate. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that should be reflected in the report, to just say the newly constructed building, because I think there's some confusion about, are we keeping any of the floors or not? And we're taking it down to that first floor, which this paragraph goes on to explain.
And I love the notion of a fitness center. I had never seen that in here before. We're building a fitness center in the docking building. That's kind of neat. All right, short man. We have folks with 1:30 committee meetings when you get out of here, which is certainly appropriate. The other question I have, we're kind of short on committee rooms. I'm wondering if we might make a recommendation to at least look at committee rooms being added into the docking building along with the fitness center. That's an awesome idea. Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I worked for the university a long time when we focused on a class hour change. The same would be true for committee meetings. So some people are going to get out of a 1:30 committee and need to be at a 2:30 committee or 2:30 committee. So even if we have the tunnel, I think that would present a problem. But we can look for other spaces.
There you go. Or other spaces for committee rooms. That sounds fantastic. All right, committee recommendations for the Department of Administration. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we approve the capital improvement budgets for fiscal year 2022 through 24 with the one change to the description of the Docking State Office building construction.
All right. And committee rooms?
Are you seconding it? Is that it?
I will second it with committee rooms.
Is there another second?
Second by Representative Alcala. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. I won't nay it just because of committee rooms. All right. All right. Do we have time? Can we squeeze in the Department of Children and Families in 3 minutes? Let's give it a whirl. Oh, it's dialing. We could do it in 1.
Should not be a problem, sir.
Welcome to Committee Down.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Dylan Deere. I'm with the Legislative Research Department. This is the budget for the Department for Children and Families. The agency is requesting capital improvements expenditures of $950,000, all from special revenue funds. It's an increase of $500,000, or 111.1%. This is all for the remodeling of the lobby and interview rooms in the Topeka Service Center. The agency indicates that they serve approximately 10,000 clients per year, as well as 250 employees. The renovation is to include the first floor lobby, interview rooms, updating interior finishes, increasing security in interview rooms with glass and panic buttons, upgrading technology, centralizing workflow supports, and adding a lactation room. With that, I would stand for questions.
Seeing none, let's roll on to 24.
There is no 24 request.
Oh, that is easy. All right. I think we can get this done before the time's up. Committee, do we have a recommendation for the Department of Children and Families 2023, since there is nothing for 2024? Senator Francisco.
I move the committee recommend the capital improvements as proposed.
Second.
Seconded by Senator Reddy. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Very good. That will be our recommendation. Thank you, Dad. All right, committee. As you may have noticed throughout the course of the meeting, we will be meeting on Monday. I don't think we have anything scheduled for Wednesday of this week, or Thursday of this. Okay, very good. We will be meeting on Monday, same bat time, same